Alrighty, let's go through some of my comments. First up is, Macedonians were all Slavs. Alexander was not a Slav. Oh gosh, where do I begin? Alexander was certainly Greek. His family, the Argead dynasty, according to legend and Herodotus, originated from Argos. Herodotus spoke of 3 brothers who fled from Argos and eventually founded a kingdom in Macedonia. So the Greek dynasty that Alexander is part of is foreign to the region of Macedonia, but this doesn't mean that the ancient Macedonians were Slavic. The Slavs didn't settle in the region until the 6th century AD, about an entire millennia after Alexander's time, and they became embedded in the region when they started defeating the ethnically and culturally Greek Eastern Romans. So Nat Soki, I'm afraid that the ancient Macedonians were not Slavs. Next, why is an Asian man talking about Macedonia? Talk about your own country. Thanks Josh, the cat, and Eric, who wrote a very similar comment. I find it a little bit disturbing that you believe that your ethnicity determines what history you're allowed to talk about, which in this case, if you're a modern Slavic Macedonian, I'm afraid by your own rules, you're not allowed to talk about Alexander the Great. But I don't think that, fortunately. When it comes to educating people on, say, TikTok, I think you should speak on the topics you know best. For example, I know far more about the Roman Republic than Shang Dynasty China, for example. Or are you implying that I can't talk about Rome because of the colour of my skin? And what exactly is my history anyway? Sure, I'm ethnically Chinese, but I've mostly been educated in the West, and thus I'm far more qualified to speak about the latter. But in the end of the day, I think gatekeeping areas of history to related ethnicities is a very dangerous game to play. The idea that only Greeks can talk about Greek history, black people about black history, is repugnant, because at the end of the day, all these stories are interconnected. It's all human history. To gatekeep would only artificially sow more divides between ethnic groups, and do we really want to see more of that? Instead, we should aim to understand each other better, which means we should stop gatekeeping this. Next, ancient Greece was democratic? Really? Athens was the only state that had democracy. You know about history what I know about astrophysics, and I know nothing. Oh boy, I haven't met anyone being this wrong and yet this confident. Many of the most famous Greek city-states were democracies at one point or another, including Syracuse, Corinth, Argos, Rhodes, and even oligarchies like Sparta had quite a few democratic elements. And I do want to make clear that democracies in ancient Greece were not rare. Rather, they were the norm. Josiah Ober, in The Rise and Fall of Classical Greece, wrote, "Tyranny failed to become the Greek norm. While many prominent Greek polis experienced tyrannical interludes, a given tyrannical regime seldom outlived 2 human generations. When Greek tyrants were overthrown, they were typically replaced not by another ruling family with its own coalition, but by a citizen-centered government." So how many of these 1100-ish different Greek polis were democratic? Well, historian David Teagarden counted the different regime changes in the Greek world from about the early 7th century to late 4th century BC and found this. From the early 6th century to the late 4th century BC, the percentage of states to have experienced democracy went up from 4 to 46%. Using this study and his own work, Josiah Ober estimates that about half the polis of the Greek world were democracies by the year 300 BC, and that citizen self-government remained the default form of governance for many more centuries. Do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments below and I'll make another one of these.